But it's not just the idea of grace or favor that I want to look at. It's what we do in response to that grace or favor. And in our parashah this morning, 4 men and 4 women received God's chen, grace or favor. And I want to examine what they did with it, compare it with other things within the Bible, and then we need to apply that to ourselves. Because in the end, we need to ask ourselves, do we steward God's favor or do we squander God's favor? And remember I said this was an incredibly convicting message? I realize that I squander so much of God's favor, whether it is financially or time or the affection of my wife or the forgiveness that I've been given because the Lord decided to die on a tree for me. I squander so much of this, and I was dealing with it this morning. So this is not an easy message for me to deliver just because I was convicted. Why is it so important that we should ask ourselves whether we steward God's favor or grace or whether we squander God's favor or grace? 2 reasons. Number 1, we don't know when God's favor or grace will end with us. Meaning, will there be another moment of grace? Will there be another moment of favor? We don't ever know. So we want to use it to the best of our abilities. Look at Ecclesiastes, for example. Solomon says, sometimes things don't make sense in the world, but wisdom is great. And do what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And the second reason that it's important that we ask ourselves whether we steward or squander God's favor or grace, because sometimes if we don't, there are consequences. If we don't, there are consequences. And if you don't get another opportunity, then you don't get to redo things. Think about all the times, whether it's between you and God or between you and another person, where they've extended favor or grace and you didn't take advantage of that, and how you wish you had. Maybe it was a financial investment you could have made. Maybe you could have paid off some debt with an extra financial gift. Maybe it was the forgiveness of a friend that was extended to you and you just threw it away. You don't know if it'll ever happen again. Now, when we examine Noah, it's really interesting here, okay? Because Noah sort of deserved favor. He sort of deserved favor, as if we could actually say that, okay? Remember, I told you unmerited favor is not exactly what we're going for this morning, but let's just look at this for a minute. Turn to Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations, or blameless. And Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. That's significant because it reminds us of not only Adam and Eve, but it also reminds us of Enoch, who we believe never actually died, but was taken up a few chapters before. So it's reminiscent of this amazing relationship between Noah and God, and Adam and Eve and God, and Enoch and God. But the Bible continues. It says he was a just man. He had no wrong in him. He was perfect or blameless in his generations. Now, I don't know if that means he was completely sinless, but the point was God loved him, and God loved him even more because he was a great guy, and he followed what God said. And if you look in other places in the New Testament, some of the writer of Hebrews described Noah as doing all that God commanded in Hebrews 11, verse 7. And Peter in 2 Peter 2:5, Peter says that Noah was a righteous preacher. This was a good guy. If anybody deserved favor or a little bit extra, it was him. And because you know the story of Noah, compare that to the other people on earth. God was so enraged with what the other people on earth were doing, i.e. sin, that he was willing to wipe it out. So in comparison with these other people, Noah was great. And just as a man by himself, he was incredible. So if anybody deserved favor or grace? It was Noah. But then we get to the other people that sailed with him on the ark, or floated rather. I guess you can't say sailed. It was Noah's 3 sons and their wives and Noah's wife. Now, we don't know anything about this family. I would hope that the sons were good guys. I would hope that the wives were good ladies, and that the wife was a wonderful woman. But we don't know that, so we kind of have to read between the lines, but you really can't make a definitive judgment about that. Now, we know at the end of the story, Ham does something very disrespectful to his father, and his father curses him because of that. So we know that they're not perfect, not at least the way that Noah was perfect. We also don't know if they were deserving of God's favor or not, or whether they were just on the coattails of Noah's favor. You know what I mean? But when we ask the question, what do we do in response to God's favor? The realistic question, I say, do we steward it or do we squander it? If we steward it, it should change us. If we squander it, then we think we've won a victory. Think about this situation, just the idea of deserving or meriting some sort of favor or grace from God. We describe Noah as a perfect, as a just man, as a righteous preacher. He did all that God commanded. We can say that he deserved a little bit extra, at least from our perspective. But the others on the boat, we can't say that they deserved anything extra. So you have to ask, why did they get extended the favor of God? How about this? If you compare them to all the people on the earth that perished, why in the world would the descendants of Noah get favor if they didn't merit it, and not the people that perished on the earth? Why in the world couldn't God extend his favor to those other people? It doesn't seem fair, does it? But it's not fair. The whole idea of fair lends itself to the idea of a game or a victory. Grace and God's favor doesn't work in a system of it's fair or it's not fair. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. God has favor when he has favor. God will have favor on whom he will have favor. Sometimes it will not make sense to us. That doesn't mean that we should not respond in a godly way, in a righteous way. But the idea of it's fair or it's not fair doesn't work in God's system of merit or grace. If it's unfair for anybody in particular, it's unfair to God, because he does not have to extend favor or merit. He is righteous and holy, and he doesn't need us to do anything special for him. But in this circumstance, what we know is he extended favor to Noah, whether we think he deserved it or not. He extended favor to Noah's wife, his sons, and their wives, whether we think they deserved it or not. Whether you think it's fair or not, you should throw that idea out, because that has nothing to do with God's actions. So, let's ask ourselves, what kind of favor was given to Noah? In chapter 6, verse 18, after he describes the boat that is supposed to be built, God says, I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. God is making an agreement with Noah. The favor extended to him was this agreement. And then one thing that was really unique, we kind of read this and it's only a couple chapters, but in that day, hypothetically, there was no rain yet. And if you had a boat, it was probably some little dinghy, some little canoe sort of thing. The size of this boat was immense. How long do you think it took for them to build this boat? Forever. Now, I'm not going to say that this is definite, but imagine what the people around Noah are thinking as this giant boat starts to be erected. 1 Peter 3:20, another example of favor given to Noah. God waited patiently for Noah to build the boat. God waited patiently, as if God's bound by time. But he said, okay, Noah, I want you to build the boat. Maybe it took 100 years. Maybe it took 100 years to build this boat and the stables that were within it. God extended favor by choosing Noah to save mankind and to save himself and to save his family. God showed favor to Noah by explaining to him how to build this ark. There's a lot of favor here, and you kind of have to read between the lines. As the boat's going up and the people may be wondering, what are you doing? And apparently the New Testament says that Noah was a preacher of righteousness, so I have to believe that he was almost warning these people. Guys, repent. Turn away from whatever you're doing. God is not pleased. God is going to rain down on you. Literally, rain on you. So God extended a lot of favor. And what did God extend to his sons? And to the wives, and to the wife? Arguably, this is more grace or favor than was given to Noah, because in our eyes, they didn't deserve it, okay? They were saved because of their father. I assume that their wives were saved because of their father-in-law, and God waited again for the ark to be built so that they could get on it. He decided to save them. Why? Because God decided to. The important question is, would they steward this favor, or would they squander this favor? Maybe they deserved it, maybe they didn't, but that's not the point. What would they do with it? How did Noah respond? He absolutely did build the ark. He built the stables in the ark. Apparently, he taught others righteousness. He had hope in a really unique and desperate situation. He tried and tried again after the birds kept failing to find land at the end of the story. And finally, one bird did not return. And at the end, when there was no people left on earth except for he and his family, he did the next step to replenish and repopulate the earth. The kids knew what they had to do. They had to have kids. And he planted a vineyard. He needed to sort of stabilize their existence. He believed what God was saying was going to happen, would be true, that the earth would be repopulated, and that the cleansing sort of event of the flood would have its appropriate effect and cleanse the world. So what did Noah's sons do in response to this favor? Well, they probably helped Dad build the ark. They went into the ark, this weird and ominous object. They helped him gather all the animals, I would have to assume, feed all the animals, and they repopulated the way that they were supposed to do. So that begs the question, how do we respond to God's favor? I mean, we're not given an ark-like scenario. We don't necessarily have those occasions, although some of you might, where God does something and it literally saves your life. But there are moments that we all experience every single day, and there are sometimes bigger moments that we experience that we know God's hand was on us. Or even a friend or a person might show us favor. My wife said the other day, because she was so depressed that we were bringing a baby into a world that is so mashugana, okay? Did anybody see that video of those bikers in New York City chasing that SUV? Okay.